So guys, IULOL here. With the NA and EU beta just around the corner, I want to go into some settings and tips that will make the game a lot less annoying for you. If you're playing Lost Ark for the first time and some parts of the game seem really clunky or frustrating, it's probably because you don't know the shortcut to make your life easier. I hope this video can help you guys out. First of all, I just want to apologize for the lack of videos lately. I've been pretty busy, but I'm still streaming twice a week. So you can stop by my Twitch if you have any questions or if you want to hang out. Now you might be watching this when the beta is already out, and in that case, you probably want to play the game. So I'm going to make this video as short and as simple as possible. First of all, let's go over some settings that I think you should check out before you start the game. The first part of this will be from the actual beta client. Most of these are standard video settings that you can find in any game, so I won't go over them in too much detail. I will talk about this one, which lets you force 21:9 aspect ratio if you don't have a 21:9 monitor. This will make it so there are black bars on the top and bottom of your screen, and it can take some time getting used to, but if you're a PvPer, this will actually increase the field of vision, so it's definitely a must if you want to do competitive PvP. There are a lot of good videos about it, including the one by Lin Null, so I would recommend you just check them out on YouTube if you want to know more. For most people though, especially PvE monkeys like me, you can just leave that off. It won't really affect your gameplay. Next, I'll talk about some of the performance settings, for example, very high or medium or low. To be honest, I just leave them on default, and I have a pretty beefy computer, so it doesn't really matter, but the game is really well optimized as it runs on Unreal Engine 3, and the camera angle basically makes it so the game looks really good even on lower end computers. So the difference between very high and low is actually not as noticeable as you might think. It only really matters if you want to zoom in and take a lot of pictures and stuff. I'll let you play around on your own time. Here are some colorblind filters, and if you need these, you probably already know what you need, so I won't go over them in too much detail. Now for these post-processing effects, I would actually probably turn most of these off because it can get pretty disorientating, but again, this is all personal preference. They are on by default. And audio, most importantly, we can finally play the game in English, but there's also German, Spanish, and French available. If you're looking for the Korean, Japanese, or even Russian voices, we don't have them available yet, and I think the developers said that it might be a possibility in the future, but definitely no concrete plans, so I wouldn't get my hopes up if I were you. Here there are some presets that let you prioritize various sounds, but I haven't really messed with these, and you can just check the rest of them out for yourself. I will talk about this one, which is cooldown alert, and this basically makes it so that whenever a skill you have that's on cooldown comes off cooldown and is available to use again, it plays a little bloop or alert sound. And that might sound good in theory, but you can't actually customize this sound, nor can you set which skills you want the alert for. So if you wanted to know when important buffs or whatever become available, well, you can't really select which ones have the alert. So what will happen is your skills will bloop every time they come off cooldown, and since you have 8 skills, some of them which might be on very short cooldowns, the game will just spam you with alerts. I leave this off. If they ever implement a more advanced version of this feature with more customization options, then I think it might be very useful, but for now, I wouldn't use this. Next, we'll have some voice chat options, and this is very unique to the global client because this doesn't exist in any of the other games. But from my experience in the alpha, I would definitely uncheck auto join voice chat because you really don't want to automatically join every voice chat you come across. You can also switch between push to talk and always on for your mic. Now for the rest of the settings, I will be using the Russian client because as of recording, I can't actually log into the global client to show you the settings right now. First thing is the mouse cursor. You can actually change the appearance of this through the menu without using third-party software. You can also change the appearance by holding Control and scrolling the mouse wheel up or down. This can be helpful for people who want a little more contrast or just like the look of certain cursors. You can also change the size from normal to middle to large. Now I just leave it on the default settings, but feel free to pick whatever you like the most. The next thing in the community tab is the text options. You can change the opacity of the text box. You can change the font size, and you can also change the color of various chat channels. So if you're familiar with a game like WoW, you have different ways of chatting, let's say to your party, to your guild, to your raid, to your area, whatever. And they each have a default color, and you can change the color to your liking. I just leave everything on default because I'm used to it. There's also a text box to display the chat timestamps. The next thing we have is macros. And again, if you're familiar with WoW, you'll be all too familiar with macros. In Lost Ark, macros are a lot more simple than maybe in other games, but basically macros in Lost Ark just means quick phrases that you can set and bind to a hotkey. For example, you can enter a set phrase that you want to say, hello there, and by default this will say it to everyone in the say channel, which means people in your immediate vicinity. You can also change it to say it in your guild, your party, your raid, etc. For example, as a support, you might want to tell your party that you've given them the attack buff but not your raid, because your other raid members won't be affected by the buff anyway. You can see that there's no option here to bind it to a specific key, but that part is actually in another part of the options, so we'll get to that in a bit. The event or notifications tab basically lets you select which notifications pop up on the screen, for example, when someone logs on. Next, let's go into the gameplay section, which is probably the most important part that I wanted to show you guys, because it can definitely affect your quality of life. Now, the first checkbox here is show damage. I believe it's on by default, and I don't really see why you would want to turn this off. I guess if you wanted less visual clutter, then maybe, but if you're playing a damage dealer, it's all about those numbers, right? Just leave this on. Show recovery is the same, but for healing numbers. I actually like to keep this off. It kind of adds to the chaos and confusion on your screen, while also providing not that much benefit, unlike damage numbers. If you're a support and you're healing somebody, you already know that you're healing them, and you don't really care about how much you're healing them for, since it doesn't really change your decisions during the raid. This might be useful when you're testing certain things, for example in the training room, but for raids in the most part, I generally just keep this off. The next is effects. This determines whether or not you see status effects that affect your character, for example buffs or debuffs. I actually like to keep this on because in a lot of raids, it's important to know what happens to your character. For example, if you're playing a damage dealer and the bard gives you the attack buff, then the words heavenly performance will appear on your screen, meaning that you have the attack buff. It's not always that easy to look down because you might have many buffs stacked on top of each other, so having the little text that pops up is helpful. Most importantly, there are some boss mechanics that require you to quickly check what kind of buff you have and act accordingly, most notably in the Vicus raid, or I guess I should say Vicus now. In that case, this option lets you quickly see what buff you get without having to look down at your feet or check your debuffs bar and potentially wipe the raid. Now, the next options are for showing HP, and you can see that this is that orange stick that you see above my character. If you have player turned off, you will not see that orange bar, but I would recommend turning the player HP on, because like I said, you want to be focusing on what's happening on your screen, where the boss is, what kind of attacks it's using, and you don't really want to be looking down at your abilities or your health bar. Having the health bar in the middle of your screen will help you focus on the fight without having to look down. Now, this translation isn't entirely accurate, so bear with me, but the next one is party and raid, but this should really just be party members in your raid or party members. I check this because as a support player, I want to know the health of my party members, but most importantly, it puts the bar above my party member's head so I can quickly see where they are and where I need to drop my buffs or position myself. I leave the HP bars for the rest of the raid unchecked because in Lost Ark, support abilities only affect your own party. Even though the other party is in the same raid, my buffs won't affect them, so I don't really need to know where they are or what their health bars are. If you're worried about missing information, there's another set of health bars you can look at, so you don't have to worry. Now, the rest of them are also pretty self-explanatory, so I'll just move through them quickly. You generally want to keep summons off because, again, visual clarity is important and it's not like you'll need to be healing summons. Also, target is for enemies, and I like to keep this on because it generally makes solo content more convenient, but if you're finding that your game is lagging a lot, you can just take this off. The next part is actually pretty important. There's a section for combat effects, and this basically determines what skill effects you see from other players. If you have it to all, like I have here, then you'll see skill effects from all players, which means people in your party, people in the raid, whatever. And if you play Lost Ark in endgame for 10 minutes, you'll quickly realize that it's way too much. The skill effects in this game look great, but what that means is that your eyes are going to go crazy from trying to process all the explosions and whatever spells people are using, and you won't be able to see the boss. So most people will pick one of the other options. Now, if you're a DPS, you might be able to get away with using this option, which is opponents or enemies, which means that you will only be able to see your own skill options and, of course, the boss. You won't be able to see the skill effects of all of your party or raid members, making it easy to focus on what the boss is doing. Unfortunately, that also means you won't be able to see the effects of your support players. So if they put a buff or a heal on the ground, you won't be able to see it. In the Korean version of the game, they just released a new update that makes it so you can see your own effects, plus helpful effects like buffs or heals. That's the one I would recommend you use, but I'm not sure if it's actually in the global release yet, so we'll find out tomorrow. If you're watching this and the game is already out, you can just check for yourself. It should say something like opponents and helpful buffs. Apply battle outline will make it so that your character glows white and there's an outline around it, even if it's hidden behind a boss or in the middle of a group of enemies or allies. I would recommend using this because As I've said a few times, it's kind of easy to lose track of yourself in the middle of a chaotic fight, and this just helps you a little bit more with knowing exactly where your character is. Marking skills, or the option here, basically marks enemy skills with special marks, and I've tried it. I don't really see the point of this. I would just leave it off. I don't want this video getting too long, so let's just cover the ones that I think are more important. I like to check off display low HP. This is the effect where if your HP is low, you start to hear your heart pound and the edges of the screen turn red and whatnot. Some people might think it's immersive, but I don't know about you guys. When I see that effect, I get nervous. And especially when I'm low HP, I really just find the effect distracting and I just need to focus, so I leave this off. Since you can see the HP above your character anyway, you're definitely going to know if you're low HP, so I don't really think it's necessary. The next one is auto move. By default, the auto move hotkey is T. If you hit T, your character will start running in the direction that it's facing. Even if you move your mouse around, it won't change the direction and your character will just run in a straight line. And if you click somewhere, then your character will change direction, but it will continue to run in a straight line in the new direction. This is actually the default option, and I prefer it that way because what you can do is you can hit T, your character will start running, and in that time you can manage your inventory, do other things in the menu, collect your mail, change a song on YouTube, whatever. However, the other option you can click is advanced mouse, which means that your character will always run towards the direction of your mouse. That means if you hit T, your character will run in the direction that they're going, but if you move your mouse to the right, your character will automatically follow the direction of your mouse. This sounds more convenient, and it is, if all you're focusing on is running. But the reason I don't like this option is because let's say if you open your bag and you start moving your mouse around to arrange your items, your character will start running around randomly. So I like having the convenience of making my character run forward and being able to do other things. Sometimes I'll run into a wall, sure, but it just takes a few clicks to sort my character out, and I can usually do that while I'm doing menus anyway. The next one is skill aim assist. This is exactly what it sounds like. It helps you aim your skills by sort of locking them on to the enemy. It kind of snaps your cursor to the boss and helps you aim your skills that way, but I don't really like it because, for example, if a boss is charging from left to right, it will shoot at where the boss currently is. And if you've played any games with skill shots, you know that a lot of times you have to lead your skills to hit a moving target, and skill aim assist negatively affects your ability to do so. I would definitely leave this off. Camera shake effect I turn off because just like with the display low HP, I just find the effect really distracting, but if you're into that, you can leave it on. Now, the bottom of this is tripod notice, or the tripod alarms, and this is also a really important part of the game, but I'll leave this to be covered in a separate video. At the beginning of the game and for quite a while, you won't really need to use this yet, so just leave it alone. The next tab is for showing names and all things related to names like titles, guilds, whatever. It's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm gonna skip it for now. This whole next section is for hotkeys, and unfortunately with Lost Ark, you don't really have as much customization over the keys as you do with other games. What I will point out is that in the beginning of the game, when you first log in, it will ask you to choose between two movement schemes. One is left click to move, right click to use abilities, or the other one is right click to move, left click to target abilities. If you're used to MOBA games like Dota or League of Legends, you'll probably want to use something like right click to move, but let's say if you're a PoE player or an ARPG player, you might be familiar with left click to move. So if you're like me, when the game first asked you to choose, you might have clicked something randomly by accident and you don't know how to change it back. Well, the option to change between the two movement schemes is actually here in this checkbox, so it swaps the left and the right mouse buttons. Lastly, this is the place where you'll find the hotkeys for the macros. You can see that phrase 1 is default bound to Alt 1, and then phrase 2 is Alt 2, and so on. The last part has a section for controller, but I don't really play a controller, so if you're into that, you can check that out. Next, I'll talk about some chat settings. By default, you'll notice that the game just likes to spam you with all kinds of messages. What you want to do is you want to right click on the chat tab and go to chat tab settings, and you'll be able to find checkboxes that determine what the game shows you in your text box. I would really recommend turning off loot for self party. This basically shows you what yourself and your party members loot in game, but there's kind of a lot of loot that you pick up, especially in stuff like chaos dungeons, so I would just turn this off. XP and currency I would definitely turn off because as you level up, you're killing a lot of monsters at the same time, and it shows you the XP and currency values for each mob that you kill. So you'll be spammed with things like gain 2 XP, gain 2 XP, gain 2 XP, picked up 2 silver, picked up 2 silver, and you won't be able to read anything, so definitely turn these 4 off, and the rest of them you guys can play around with. You can also make new tabs and set up new rules and custom names and all that stuff, so if you're someone who's really big into chatting and customization, I think you'll have plenty to play around with here. Now, before I end this video, I know it's getting kind of long, I'll leave you with some helpful tips that I really wish I knew when I first started playing, and hopefully this will save you a lot of frustration while going through the game, maybe for your first time. First of all, when you hit tab, you can open the mini map, and you can actually move this map around if you hold middle click and you drag it around. If you don't have a middle click, I don't really know what you can do. But for those of you who were wondering how you can move the minimap around, this is how. The next thing is that through the minimap, you might want to teleport to a certain square hall or triport as it's called in the global release. But if you notice, if you just left click, you'll be moving your character around. And when I first started the game, I opened the big map every time and clicked on the portal and teleported, which was really annoying to say the least. What you can actually do is from the minimap, hold Alt and left click, and it will let you teleport to any of the waypoints. Going back to the big map, you can actually right click to zoom out of a zone, and you can actually left click to zoom into any place you want to see. I didn't really know this my first time, so I would close and reopen the map each time to reset it, but you can right click to zoom out and left click to zoom in. Also, you'll notice that on the bottom left of the screen, there's a 2 port button. And if you have the function unlocked whenever you get your first boat, you can actually click this to immediately teleport to your boat. You don't have to walk all the way to the port just to leave. Now, there are a lot of different shortcuts you can do with items, and I want to make a separate video entirely just for these kinds of tips and tricks. But in the meantime, I'll cover the ones that I think are most important to you when you first start the game. You can actually hold Alt plus left click to lock an item in your inventory, which basically means that it won't be affected by the auto sort function. And yes, there is an auto sort function, and you can activate it by clicking this button in the top left, and basically it will automatically sort through your items. So even if I mess everything up like this and my bag is a mess, as soon as I click this button, it will automatically sort everything back except for the items that I have locked. So you can use this to really organize your inventory. Now, there's definitely a lot more of these little tips and tricks, but these were the main ones I wanted to get out just so you guys can enjoy the game without feeling super frustrated. I'm going to try to ramp up the content through beta and closer to launch, so toss me a subscribe if you want to help out, and stay tuned to this channel. If you've got any good tips, make sure you leave a comment, and I'm going to be doing a long stream for the beta launch tomorrow, so if you want to stop by and say hi, there's a link to my Twitch in the description below. This has been IU, and until next time, bye you.